Okay, we are up to Shiur number 6 here in volume number 17. Volume 17 in the Tzurba Merabanan, seforim Chovorot about Hilchos Shabbos, Shiur number 6. This is an exciting Shiur. Every Shiur is exciting, but this is a Shiur about an introduction to Melachos Shabbos. Introduction to Melachos Shabbos. We've discussed in all the Shiurim until now the concept of the Misasek of Shabbos. We discussed Kiddush and Havdalah and Lechem Mishnah and Shalashudis and all of the Misasek. But today we start the major, in terms of the quantity, the major discussion of Hilchos Shabbos, the Melachos of Shabbos. And today is just an introduction, which are rules and regulations that apply to every malacha. All of the 39 malachas have these rules. We're going to talk about Avos and Toldos. We're talking about Misasek, Mikalkel, Melachos, Shinui, Psik, resha, Grama, all of those ideas which relate to all malachas. So we know the Torah tells us Zachar and Shamar. So Zachar we've discussed the past couple of weeks, past couple of months, and Shamar is the Los says to guard, not to do. And the Mishnah Berurah already writes, if you look on page 245, and again this is the Lax family edition of the volumes, and it's the Peretz family volume, volume 17. We should see Yeshuos and Nechamos and Nisim for all of Am Yisrael. The Mishnah Berurah already notes on page 245. You have the second half of the introduction. I'll just like to mention part of the first half of the introduction. The Mishnah Berurah notes the importance of learning Hilchos Shabbos. Maybe we mentioned this all the way at the beginning of our Shiurim. I don't remember. But the Mishnah Berurah notes the uniqueness of learning Hilchos Shabbos. He says, first of all, one has to recognize that in terms of Chumras Ha'avera, reflecting importance of the din, Shabbos is an Isra Skila. That's the most Chamar. Bittul Aseh, Alav, Skilas Reif Harachenek at the highest level, number one. Number two, the Mishnah Berurah notes, V'nuchal liros odes chomer ha'avon, to recognize the seriousness and the stringency of this context, sheyesh be'isr chilul Shabbos, the halo b'chol ha'avonos, by all other sins, besides for the isr of avodah zara, kaimalan we hold, dimhu mumar chas v'shalom, le'echad mehem. If somebody is a heretic, doesn't follow shatnez, doesn't follow kashrus, many other isurim, okay, so they're not trusted, and they are negligent, and they have a stain in one area. But that doesn't make them what's called a mumar l'chal ha'torah kula, a mumar for all, for rejecting, and there's a fault in your religious personality. But when it comes to avodah zarah and Shabbos, right? So that itself, those two are different. So avodah zarah, you understand, you don't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but Shabbos, how is Shabbos? No, Shabbos is a mumar l'chal Torah kula, and therefore says the Mishnah Berurah that also reflects its stringency. And finally, number three, the third Kabbalistic idea, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'gam tzarach ladas haramach mitzvahs Shabbat Torah shehitel Hashem yisbarach ala adam l'zachar u'l'shamram. The mitzvahs, the 248 mitzvahs aseh that Hashem put on us to guard and to keep, who connected haramach yivam Shabbat Adam, is connected the 248 limbs, 248, 365. It's all connected to a different part of our body, and these mitzvahs that we do and the averas that we are zahir from, they give spiritual nutrition to us for eternity. These are psukim that in the Torah that teach us that Torah is life. Ki ikar chaye hanefesh l'olam haba toli b'kiyam Torah. The ikar chaye hanefesh is totally on the kiyam Torah, and therefore then he continues with the mashal and he says some mitzvos you'll be in eternity, but you could live without. They're like a finger, they're like a toe, which one can live without. It's a balmum, but one can live without it. But then there are some organs, as we know in the physical world, you can't live without. You can't live without a heart, or a brain, or lungs. So too, there are certain mitzvahs that you can't live without. And Torah is obviously, or Shabbos is obviously one of those, says the Mishnah Berurah, and therefore we have to have extra care. And now we get into page 245, which is the second half of the Hagdama. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we can love Shabbos. We can love it, and I love Shabbos. But if we don't take time to sit and learn halachas, especially the Losa says, we will find a problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ach be'eze inyan, see the second paragraph, in the middle of 245. Ach be'eze inyan nucha lavo lezua madrega shishma Shabbos v'chol pratav. How could we reach the madrega of learning Hilchos Shabbos with all of its details? There's only one way: hard work and time. Ha'etza ye'utza lazeh sheyira lezariz es atzmo lilmod Hilchos Shabbos, to study Hilchos Shabbos, v'lachzor al hatamid, and to review it. It's finite. It's not infinite. It's a finite amount of material. It's large, but it's finite. To learn it and to review it, to know what's asr and mutter. Because if we don't, afilu yilmod kol inyanim hamusarim hamizarzim l'shmir Shabbos karoi. We can learn all the Musar books relating to how awesome Shabbos is and how we have to keep Shabbos. But if I don't know what Hilchos Shabbos is, I never heard of certain Melachos, then I could love Shabbos from today till tomorrow. It's not going to help. It's not going to help. Kfar heyed banu hagom bal ur metumim. He quotes Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz in the Ur Metumim in the Yaras Dvash. Ki efshar klal b'mitzius. It's impossible liyinatzel me Isra Shabbos, to not violate an Isra of Shabbos im lo yilmod kol adinim al buryam heitev heitev. Unless we study them. Unless we study them well, it's impossible, says Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz, to fully keep Shabbos. And therefore, we have to do what we can. Says the Mishnah Berurah, one of the sibos, achaz me asibos asher yimna olam hayediya b'Hilchos Shabbos, one of the reasons that many in the world do not keep Hilchos Shabbos, because it's chamor, we don't know halachas, that's so vast. You look at the Shulchan Aruch, it's harder to understand. You have to go to the Gemara, you have to look at the Poskim. And says the Mishnah Berurah, so I'm here to tell you the reasons. I'm here to give you a pirush. That's what the Mishnah Berurah was about. And today, we have so many seforim, in Hebrew, in English, however you want it organized. We have ones that go by malacha, ones that goes by a commonality. We have, whatever it is, Hilchos Shabbos. There's no more excuses today, and therefore we have to get together and learn it. And then he even says in the continuation, Shemisha yilmod atah halacha yeda kol did b'taymo v'nimuko la'alacha l'maisa v'ra'ui v'nachon l'chol yarei v'chared l'dvar Hashem. All who are chared to keep the word of Hashem, l'chonein chaburos, get together in groups. Lilmod Hilchos Shabbos kadesh likashlu b'hem, so that we don't falter, we don't stumble. So this is exactly what we're doing. The Tzurba Hilchot series to learn Hilchos Shabbos is exactly a kiyum of these words of the Mishnah Berurah, and he says it's based on a medrash. The Yalkut in Vayakel says that Moshe Rabbeinu gathered kihilos in order to learn Hilchos Shabbos. Amar LaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe, Asei lecha kihilos gedolos v'drosh l'fnei baram Hilchos Shabbos. Study Hilchos Shabbos with them. V'yadua Sheshmir Shabbos ketikunu hu karav legeula, that also will bring the geula. If we keep Shabbos, we'll be zoche miyad hey nigalin, one Shabbos, two Shabbosos, whatever it is. But that is why it is so crucial. So that's a little introduction in terms of the Melachos that we now have the schus of starting. So first to note is, we know there are Avos Melachos and Toldos. Avos and Toldos, first topic. Avos and Toldos, we know there are 39. The Torah does not say what you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. The Torah just says, don't do malacha. Lo sasa kol malacha. What is malacha? So Torah Shabbal Pet teaches us that there are 39 avos malachos. They are all, if I don't do malacha, it's actually not just a lo sasa, it's an asay. The Rambam writes that at the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos, source number 2, on page 247, Shvisa b'shvi'i mi malacha, not doing plowing and writing and coloring, not doing all of those is a mitzvah asay. Shnei amaru v'yom hashvi'i tishbos. And if somebody does a malacha, bitel mitzvah saseh v'avar lo saseh. He's mevatel a mitzvah saseh of resting, tishbos, and he violates lo saseh. Shneimar lo saseh kal malacha. We know the Gemara tells us that men and women are equal in this regard. We had a discussion about the assays. Women were also included, because yeshno b'shmir, yeshno b'zechira, but now we're talking about the shmira. Now we're talking about the los assays, so women are obviously included. The Mishnah in Kedushin tells us there are only 3 exceptions to the rule of los assays. All los assays, even if they are time-bound, women are obligated, except the only 3 that are that they're pturos from, as the Mishnah tells us in source number 3, is baltakif, baltashchis, cutting off the payas and the beard with a razor, ubal, tatami l'mesim, and Eishes Kohen can become tamei mace. But other than that, women and men are equally bound by the los assays, of all los assays, including the los assays of a Shabbos. That's what the Sefer Chinuch also summarizes in Mitzvah Lamed Beis in source number 4. Shlolasos malacha b'yom Shabbos v'noheges b'chol makom uv'chol zman b'zacharim u'b'nekevus, men and women. Okay, so how do we know what a malacha is? What's a malacha? What's an av malacha? What's a tolda? So we know the Mishnah tells us in the 7th parak of Shabbos that there are 39, the list Avos Melachos Abraham Chasarachas. Right? That's what the Mishnah tells us in source number 5. Zorei Chorish, we go through all the processes. The first 11 are called Sidur de Pas, the way of making bread, and then there are other groups. Rav Ribiat has them into 4 groups, building and begadim, but the Gemara only has it in the first. The first 11 are the Sidura de Pas. We have them. The first daf in Baba Kama tells us that there are Avos Melachos, mashma that there are Toldos. The Avos are the source, the fathers. Toldos are the offspring, the secondary. And though, the Gemara tells us, though there are Avos and Toldos, let's say in Shvius also, Avos and Toldos, in Shvius the Toldos are Durabanan. But in Shabbos, whether it's an Av or it's a Tolda, they're both Daraisa, they're both biblical. They're both biblical. Says the Gemara in Baba Kama Beis, source number 6. Gabi Shabbos Tanan, Avos Melachos Abarim Chazarachas, Avos Mechlal Dika Toldos. There are Avos, so mashma that implies that there are also Toldos. And the Toldos are Kiyotze Bahen. The Toldos are like the Avos. Loshna Av Chatos, just like the Av is Chayiv a Korban Chatos, which means a sin offering. That's a reflection of a biblical violation, right? An Issur Daraisa. If there's a Korban Chatos, so too Loshna Tolda Chatos, Loshna Av Skilav, Loshna Tolda Skilav. If I do it on purpose, I'm Chayiv the death penalty. So what's the difference between an Av and a Tolda? Lamaisa, not how to define it. Uma Ika ben Av Tolda. So Machlokas. First the Gemara says Nafkamina di Lo Avich di Avos Bahadi Adadi. It's Hilchos Karbanos Nafkamina. If I do 2 different Avos, I'm Chayiv 2 by accident. I'm Chayiv 2 Karbanos. If I do an Av and it's Tolda, I'm Chayiv 1 Karban. So Hilchos Karbanos, that's the nafkamina. That's what the Gemara says. V'lo avid av tolda didei. Now on the top of 250, lo machayev elachata. Rabbi Lazar though says you chayev 2 in that case. He's machayev atolda b'makam av. So what does he say? He says what's the difference between av and tolda? It depends. Again, different ways to understand this line, but one way it depends if it was in the Mishkan. If it was in the Mishkan, we'll call it an av. Those are the ultimate Melachos activities that were in the Mishkan. Things that connect and resemble that act, but weren't in the Mishkan, that's going to be a Tolda. That's what the Gemara says. That which was in the Mishkan is significant, and that's called an Av. You could look at Tosfos there, and the other Rishon and the Shimon Gubetzas on Baba Kama Daf Beis for other lumdus relating to that line. So this is how we know there are Avos and there are Toldos. The Rambam says in Pirush Mishnah is there in the 7th parak of Shabbos. Va'tolda hu shetachshov belibcha al tatzos pulas osam. The result of the act that you're doing, is it the same result? The same type of result? You have to, the Rambam tells us, you have to define the act. Let's say grinding, he says. Grinding. So in the Mishkan, they did certain types of grinding. But the Rambam says, what is the definition of grinding? As an example, you take a larger item and you pulverize it. You make it into a lot of little small items. So that could apply to many. That could apply to food. That could apply to wood, anything, many other. That's the example the Rambam gives. The top of 251. Vinyan tochen hu tchinas chelik gadol va'afichaso l'chalakim ktanim. One large piece, and you cut it up into tiny pieces, into small pieces. Lefichach chituch yirakos b'Shabbos. Dicing vegetables. Okay, we're not going to get into any details so much. We'll get to the Melachos. But now we're talking about the principles. We'll always give examples to these principles. Nesiras ha'etz. If I cut wood, the sawdust that comes from the wood. O shifas mataches. Or if I cut metal very finely and I get little pieces. All of that are toldos of tochen. Bishul is cooking, but it's also softening something hard. So that Rambam says, if I cook metal, I'm chayav for bishul. You have to get to the root of the definition of the malacha, and then what was in the Mishkan was an Av, and outside the Mishkan was a Tolda. So these are the malachas. How do you get 39? So there are a couple of Ramazim. The Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Memtes, talks about how these what was done in the Mishkan. This is the Mesorah. Hey, they were chores, so we're chores. Hey, zaru, hey, dashuth. So this is the Mesorah, the Torah Shabbat Peh, we have 39. Another day there is that it says the word malacha in some form or another, malacha, malachto, maleches, 39 times in the Torah. Okay, that's one day, but there's a fascinating enough that we hold like the Mishkan one. But there's a fascinating day of this Tosfos in the Arvi Psachim that says that we had to do avodas perech in Mitzrayim. We had to do back-breaking labor. What's perach? Back-breaking labor. But says Tosfos on Kuf Yud Zayin Bebeis Psachim, not on your sheet. He says perach in Adbash. the aleph base is a mirror image. Aleph is to switch to tough, and base is to shin. In Atbash, it's vagal. Perech is vagal. In Atbash, vagal is gematria 39. So we in Mitzrayim, we had to do the 39 malachas. So that's when we went out of Mitzrayim and we became Avdi Hashem, then we stopped doing those malachas on Shabbos. We remember Hashem took us out. That also answers the question, what does Shabbos have to do with Yitzias Mitzrayim? We say in Kiddush, Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. Yontif has to do with Mitzrayim. What about Shabbos? So the answer is this pshat. Again, beautiful pshat based on the Medrash, but again, the one that we paskin is 39 comes from the Mishkan. These are the Isurei Daraisa, Avos and Toldos. We know there are also many Isurei Darabanan on Shabbos. The Rambam says, whenever I say the word Chayiv in Hilchos Shabbos, source number 8, whenever I say the word Chayiv, it means Chayiv a carbon, which means Chayiv Daraisa. Kol Makom Shneimar Hilchos Shabbos. Sheha davar zeh chayiv, hari zeh chayiv kares. Chayiv kares if I don't do it on purpose without edim. V'mayisham edim basra, if there are witnesses and warning, chayiv skila. V'mayishogeg chayiv chatas. Chayiv always means something daraisa. But, says the Rambam, v'chol makom shene'emar, she'osa davar zeh pater, if I say the word pater, exempt does not mean allowed. Exempt pater means exempt from a punishment. Hari zeh pater min hakares min haskil min hakarban. Aval aser la'asos osadavar b'Shabbos, we still can't do it. It is aser midirabanan. Yisur midivrei sofrim v'harchaka min hamalacha. That is an issa derabanan. And the Rambam says there are two types of actually yisurei derabanan. The Rambam in Perek Chaf Aleph of Hilchos Shabbos, now in source number 9, page 252, Nemar Batorah Tishbos afilu midvarim she'enon malacha chayav lishbos mehen, from the word Shabboson, shvos. That's why Isurei Derabanan of Shabbos are called shvusim, because shvusim come from that word, resting. So you're not allowed to, even things that are not malacha, I am not allowed to do. Vidvarim harbehein she'asru chacham mishum shvus. Many things the rabbis enacted that we're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Midrabanan mehen dvarim asurim mebdei domim malachas. Some of them are because it looks like a malacha, and that's why it's asur derabanan. Umehen dvarim asurim gzeira. Others don't look like it, but if you do it, you might come to do the malacha. Gzeira shemayavu mehen isur skila. Different types of isurei derabanan, and we'll have to learn all about them. There is an important Ramban, the Ritva, the grand Talmud of the Ramban, likes to quote this from his Rebbe, his grand Rebbe, the Ramban. He quotes this in Hilchos in Masechah Shabbos, but the Ramban is in Parshas Emor, where the Ramban writes a gorgeous thought relating to Isurei Derabanan of Shabbos. On the pasuk of Yelachem Shabboson, which is by Yantif, but it's the same idea, the Ramban says the Derabanans of Shabbos, yes, in terms of the Chovas Gavra, they are Derabanan, but they help create an environment, a kiyum da'araisa of Shabboson. Says the Rambam, says the Ramban, V'nirali, he quotes a Medrash. The Medrash sounds like the Shvusim are Derabanan. Are Daraisa. It sounds like it. But that's not true, says the Ramban. Shvusim are Darabanan. So he says, Nirali, Shamedrash Hazel Omar, Shinitztavinu min Torah lios lanu menucha biyantif, afilu midvarim she'enim malacha. Hashem wants us to have menucha and yantif even from things that are not included in malacha. Lo sheyitzrak kol hayom, we shouldn't be busy all day. I could have a busy day, it looks like a weekday, without violating any malacha. Daraisa. Limdo tvuos, I'll measure my grain. Velishkol peiros, I'll weigh my fruit. Vamatonos ulamale chavios, I'll fill my barrels with wine. I'll clean up my garage. Avonim, I'll schlep this here. You could, and if it's an irmu kefas choba, you could money, you could do business, not violating any malacha. All those is darabanan, paying money and schlepping. Says the Ramban, that would lose the whole tam of Shabboson. Shabboson is a mitzvah say to create a Shabbos environment. And even if the lo saseh, so to speak, is only drabanan, it's a kiyam aseh. Lokach amar Torah Shabboson sheyiyah yom shvisa umenucha lo yom torach. It says the Ramban v'zeo pirish tov v'yafeh. I like this shot. That's the Ramban, but again, that's an important point about the drabanans of Shabbos. Okay, so now we get into all of the isurim concepts that I mentioned before. All of the following is going to boil down to two words: Melachos machshavos. Melachos machshavos is how the Torah describes in Parshas Vayakel the work in the Mishkan was thought out, artisan, expert work. That's what was done in the Mishkan. So Chazal said, if that's what was done in the Mishkan, that is what is not allowed to be done on Shabbos. Whatever was done in the Mishkan is not allowed to be done on Shabbos. So in the Mishkan, they only did expert work. So what's only daraisa on Shabbos is expert Melachos Machshavas work. And therefore, the following 6 or 7 concepts do not qualify as Melachos Machshavas, and therefore, at most, it's going to be Aser D'Rabbanan on Shabbos. Number 1, the order they have it here, number 1 is Shinui. Shinui. In the Mishkan, they did Melachos in the typical way that people do Melachos. They didn't do it in an unusual way. And that's the first yisod. If I do a malacha on Shabbos in an unusual way, it makes it from a daraisa to a derabanan. The Mishnah in Shabbos Daf Kuf Gimel, source number 10. Hakosef shtei osios. If I write 2 letters on Shabbos, which is the Shiur for Kosef, bein biyamino, bein b'smolo, whether with my right hand, whether with my left hand, bein mishemecha, bein mishtei shemos. We're not going to get into Kosef now. Chayiv. If I write with my right or left hand, says the Gemara, right or left hand. Bishlama yamin lachayev. I understand if you write with your right hand, mishum de derek siva bakach. You're a righty. You write with your left hand. You write with your right hand. That's normal. Lasmol amai. If you're a righty, so why you chayev if you write with your left hand? Ain't derek siva bakach, and therefore it's clear the Gemara assumes that's not a nisadaraisa. And most of the Rabbanan, Rabbi Yirmiyah says the Mishnah must be talking about an ambidextrous beiter yad shanu. But it's clear that if I do a malacha in an unusual way, so that is only going to be an iser d'Rabbanan. The Mishnah Berurah notes here, b'shem l'chayi adam, that the hands are only a chilik for writing or carrying. If you carry with your left hand, that's normal. Right, so that's what the Chayi Adam. Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chayi Adam in source number 11. Because of Chayi Adam, the kol malachos chutz mi kosev, chayev ben b'mino ben mismolo. That's why the Gemara gives that, the Mishnah gives that example. Because most other malachas, if you could do it in both, people use both hands for different malachas. So you have to know by each malacha. What about carrying? So that's the Mishnah in Shabbos. The Mishnah says, if you carry on your head, you're putter. That's not normal carrying. Motzi masi arosha, you're putter. What about some people do? Go to some Middle Eastern countries. The people of Hutzal do it, but ladai tametzo kalada. No. Their das is nullified. We don't have to worry about them. Major machlokas, we've shown them there. You can look in Tosfos, the Rashba, and others on that Mishnah. Do we always say but ladaito? But lamaisa, for our purposes, we know that anything done in an unusual way is going to be only a drabanan. So we don't do drabanans either. So what difference does this make? In a case where there's a sakana, where I have to do malacha for some reason, I have to make a phone call, there's a danger. It's always better to do things b'shinui. It's always better because that makes it from a daraisa to a drabanan. It doesn't make a mutter, but it's b'makam sakana where I'm going to have to do malacha anyway. That will make a mutter. The Shulchan Aruch says the Shulchan Aruch sounds like you don't have to do it b'shinui if it's b'makam sakana. That's what we'll see later on. The Sephardi poskim seem to say that the Shulchan Aruch holds, maybe based on the Rambam, but the Rambam seems to say not. But the Shulchan Aruch says that pikuach nefesh on Shabbos is what we call hutra. It's totally mutter, and therefore you don't even have to try to look to do it b'shinui. But the Rama says in source number 13, V'yesh omrim, dim efshar lasos below dichui u below ichur aydei shinui. If you could do a malacha without delay, if it's going to delay, just do it straight, pikuach nefesh. But if it's not going to delay, so then if you could do it with the shinui, do it with the shinui. If you could dial the phone with your pinky, right, you could turn something off with your pinky, so that's better. That's better. It's going from a daraisa to a derabanan. Right? That's when the Mishnah Berurah paskins to call kamash and nucha la'asos beheter. If you could do it in a mutter way, mida araisa, lo shafki hatera v'naseh b'isser. So don't leave that mutter way and do it b'isser. V'nira duadin demayde shinui misacher adavamat. If it even delays a drop, but not enough to make a difference for the chola, then that is better. And that's what the Shmir Shabbos paskins, right? Against the Shulchan Aruch, like the Rama, if a shinui could be done without delay, without affecting the situation, so then that is better. Source number 15. Yesh lamait kachol ha'efshar basiyas isurim. It's always better to do less isurim. Im amnam echshash sezeh yesh bi'al, as long as it won't negatively affect al matzav hacholeh. V'gam yesh litzavsim es chumra se'iser. And also to limit the chumra of the iser. If efshar latzal mibli lavar le'isur d'rabanan, better to do a d'rabanan than a d'raisa. That's the concept of shinui. There is a big discussion in the Achronim. You have this in the footnotes on page 254. There are some Rishonim that say Shinui only makes a difference and only makes a Drabanan if the result is different, not just the act. We assume Lamaisa, even if the act is different and the result is exactly the same. If I dial a number with my pinky, the result, the number that's dialed is exactly the same. But there are some Rishonim that say, oh, maybe if the result is the same, it doesn't make a difference. It's still Daraisa. But we're Mekel. We're Mekel regarding that. He quotes from the Eglei Tal that that Shinui is good enough in terms of considering it Shinui. But you have there the Yalkut Yosef in source number 16 that say maybe we go like the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, that it's Hutra, and therefore there's no even L'chadchila to do a Peshinui. If it is a makom sakana, then you could just do it. Then you could do it straight. And all of these have many ramifications. You have a couple of sources here relating to the instructions that the chief rabbinate, the instructions that Rav Shmuel Eliyahu gave during our time when there's an Eisara in terms of phones, in terms of guns, in terms of violating. Again, we always pikuach nefesh is mutter, but if we could always minimize the isurim, that's what we try to do in terms of muksa and other halachas. So this is all number one, Shinui. Number two, and that's not Melachos Machshavas, because in the Mishkan they did exactly normal, typical way of doing Malacha. Number two, Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa, page 259. There is a Machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa. What is a Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa? That's a great kasha. There are different opinions in the Rishonim. An example is given. We know clearly some examples. The Mishnah in Shabbos in source number 19. If somebody carries out Hamozi Hasameis B'mita, there's a dead body in the house, I want to carry it outside the house because I don't want it in my house. It's putrid, it's going to make it smell. Maybe there are kohanim in the house. So if I carry out the mace, machlokes. Chayiv, the Tanakama says I'm chayiv for doing that on Shabbos. Remember, chayiv means daraisa. V'chein kizayis ben ha-mace. Kizayis ben ha-nevela. Uka adasham ben ha-sheret. Some source of tumis in my house. If I carry it outside, chayiv, I'm chayiv. Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon says pater. Pater means Aser Durabanan. Remember, that's the machlokas. The Gemara says, what is this machlokas about? Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa. The Tanakama is really the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda by law holds Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa is chayiv, and therefore it doesn't make a difference that it's Ein Tzricha Lagufa. We don't know what that means yet. While Rabbi Shimon says, no, Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa is an Iser Durabanan. It is pater. So what is a Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa? So there are a number of shitas in the Rishonim. We'll mention two, Rashi and the Tosfos. Rashi says in source number 20, Melachot She'ein Tzricha Lagufa has something to do with the inherent nature of the act. Usually, the act is to create a direct result. Let's say I carry something out because I want it out there. I want to have something there, so I carry it out there. That's the ultimate, that's the tzorach lagufa of the malacha of hotzah. But what if I'm carrying something out because I don't want it here, not because I want it there? I'm kind of preventing it from being here. It's a preventative removal type of a result. That's Ein Tzricha Lagufa according to Rashi. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says in source number 20, if you carry it a mace shalem, even v'kamalacha she'ein tzricha ela l'salka me'alav, I am removing a problem. That's Ein Tzricha Lagufa. What if you trap an animal on Shabbos, not because you want the animal, but because you don't want it to bite you, you don't want it to hurt you? That's a Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa. Why? Because the ultimate reason for trapping is because you want the item. But here it's just to remove. I don't want it. I want to prevent. That's a Malacha She'ein Tzricha Lagufa according to Rashi. Tosfos has a different pshat of what Ein Tzricha Lagufa means. What was the purpose that it was done in the Mishkan for? In the Mishkan, they did things for the ultimate purpose of the act. If whatever reason was done in the Mishkan, that's Tzricha Lagufa. If I do the same act, but I do it for a different purpose than was done in the Mishkan, that's Ein Tzricha Lagufa. And therefore I'm going to be, according to Rabbi Shimon, I'm going to be pater. That's what Tosfos says in source 21. Ki atzorach shoisa malacha naasis b'shvilo b'mishkan hu gufa malacha v'sharsho. The reason that it was done in the Mishkan, that is the ultimate. That's the ultimate reason. So, machlokes, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Who do we paskin like? Machlokes. The Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. The Rambam paskins Melachot She'ein Tzricha Lagufa is chayiv on Shabbos. So it doesn't make a difference. Tzricha Lagufa, Ein Tzricha Lagufa, says the Rambam in source 22, Parak Aleph Halacha Zayin of Hilchos Shabbos. Kol ha'oseh malacha b'Shabbos. Whoever does a malacha on Shabbos, Afal pi she'eino tzarach lagufa shel malacha chayiv aleha. Even though you don't need the guf of the malacha, you're not doing it for that ultimate purpose, chayiv aleha. For whatever the definition of the Rambam has. Ketzai, for example, Harisha Kibas Haner, in the days of old, why they do extinguishing in the Mishkan? To create coals. If I extinguish for any other reason, and I want the oil, I want the wick, I want to save it, because I don't want something to burn, that's a Melachot She'ein Tzricha Lagufa, and you're still chayiv. You're still chayiv for that, says the Rambam. That's the Rambam Shita. Most other Rishonim argue. The Ravid and the Rashba and most Rishonim argue and say, no, we pass in like Rabbi Shimon. We pass in Melachos Gufa is pater, is only Asur D'Rabbanan. That's the Ravid in Hilchos Shabbos in source 23. The Rashba, V'anan Kamina Reb Shimon de pater. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes both opinions, but seems to paskin like Rov Rishonim. The Shulchan Aruch and Shin Tazayin, talking about trapping, source 25. Page 261. Shar shratzim v'hatsadam l'tzorich chayiv. If I trap something because I want it, I'm chayiv. That's a regular tzeda, trapping. V'shalo l'tzorich ostam. But if I trap it for some other reason, pater avalasar is also d'Rabbanan or the Rambam chayiv. Because the Rambam be chayiv. I'm chayiv on that because the Rambam is also chayiv. But the Mishnah Brura clearly, and even the Shulchan Aruch, it's not so clear. He quotes both opinions. He quotes both opinions, both in Shin Tazayin and Shin Lamed Daled, but we paskin like the Rov Rishonim against the Rambam. That's what the Mishnah Brura says on the next page. Halacha Kideya Rishona. Even the Sephardi modern poskim, the Alkid Yosef says the majority of poskim disagree with the Rambam. Melachos the Guf is only D'Rabbanan. But again, it's a Chomer D'Rabbanan. It's a Chomer D'Rabbanan because we have that Rambam Shita that says it is a daraisa, right? And that's where the Mishnah Brura gives the example of extinguishing. It's only going to be tzricha legufa daraisa if I want for the coals. Most extinguishing today, turning off lights or any other types of extinguishing, is going to be at most in issa darabanan because of malacha shein tzricha legufa. There's an interesting tshuva you don't have it in front of you of Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe discusses. The examples sometimes are given. If a goy says "B'mechal Shabbos" or "I'm going to kill you." So the Maharik has a line. The Maharik in Tshuva, Rav Moshe discusses this in Arachayim Aleph Kuf Chaf Aleph, and he discusses this Maharik. The Maharik says, shouldn't every case of ones be a case of Melachot Shein Legufa? I'm only doing this if somebody's forcing me to do Melachot Shabbos. I'm only doing this to save my life. I'm not doing this for the purpose that it was done in the Mishkan, right? The cooking, right? Cook for me or I'm going to kill you, right? So I'm not cooking to cook. I'm cooking this to save my life. So this should never be a case of Da'oraisa Hilchos Shabbos, right? There should never be that kind of case. And what if somebody's sick? I'd rather not be sick. Maybe like Rashi's definition, right? If somebody has to be Mechal, so maybe everything Makam Sakanas should be an Issa D'Rabbanan, because I'd rather not be in this situation. So Rav Moshe says you can't go that far. You can't go that far. You can look at the Lumdus there. The Rav Moshe discusses from a Tshuva from 1944. Yud Gimel Tammuz 1944, Tafshin Daled. Rav Moshe discusses that Maharik. Okay. Next, Davar Shein Miskave. Next page, 264. We discussed Shinui is not Melachos Machshavos, and Melachos Shein Tzricha Legufa is not Melachos Machshavos. Melachos Machshavos has to be Tzricha Legufa, especially according to what Tosfos said. Davar Shein Miskave. What if I do a malacha, which I'm not doing a malacha? I'm doing an act that might cause a malacha to be done. That's also Machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, but that's also a lack of Davar Shein Miskave, a lack of Melachos Machshavos, according to Rabbi Shimon, because Melachos Machshavos means thought out, exact. I'm going to do an act, and this is going to be the result. What's Davar Shein Miskave? I do act A, which might or might not cause act B. What's the classic example? Grama. The Gemara says in Shabbos Chav Beis, I'm dragging a bench over some earth. It's not very soft earth. It's semi-soft. Maybe it'll cause a ridge. Maybe it won't cause a ridge, which is the malach of choresh plowing. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe not. Then maybe it will. Not that it's for sure going to cause a hole. I just don't know. That's not called Davar Shein Miskaving. But if I don't, it might or might not be. So then that's going to be Bachlokas. That's the case of Grama. Rabbi Shimon holds mutter. Rabbi Yehuda holds aser. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Omer, source 29. A person is allowed to drag a bed or a bench, as long as he does not have any kavana to make the ridge. As long as you don't have kavana to make the ridge, it's mutter. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins like Rabbi Shimon. Here we paskin, Davar Shein Miskaveh is mutter, Davar Shein Miskaveh mutter, v'hu, right? So the Psik resha, we'll get to that. Hilka gora adam mita kisi v'savsal, bein gedolim ben getanim, uvachli is kavin lasas charitz. By the way, Davar Shein Miskaveh is a principle that applies not only in Shabbos, but also in Kol HaTorah Kula. A Nazir is not allowed to comb his hair. Right? Well, if it would be a Davar Shein, let me say it this way. If it would be a Davar Shein Miskaveh, he could comb his hair very lightly because there's a good chance that hair won't fall out if he does it very softly, and therefore it's a davar she'eino miskaven, and therefore it might not happen, and that's why it is mutter. We'll get to the next step. But look what the Shulchan Aruch says. Other examples. I'm allowed to walk on grass on Shabbos. 31. Mutter leilech al gabi asavim bein lachim bein yeveshim. Why? Sometimes I look at my feet after I walked on grass, and sometimes blades of grass are on my shoes, but it's a davar she'eino miskaven. Not every step is going to pull out grass. Kivan she'eino miskaven litlosh. Even barefoot, the Shulchan Aruch Harav says. Even barefoot, which is more of a chance, still, we paskin, as long as one does something that is a davar she'eino miskaven, it might not cause the malacha, that's mutter. And that's what the Shmir Shabbos says in source 33, mutter adam l'chachich benachas. A person could put their fingers through their hair, or softly comb, in a case where it's not vadai that the hair is going to be pulled out. If I have something in my beard, I could take out the food, even though hair might get pulled out. I have to be careful. The Tzitz Eliezer, another example. If somebody's teeth generally don't bleed when they brush their teeth, they can brush their teeth on Shabbos. Okay, we'll get to toothpaste and but Lamaisa, if your teeth don't bleed, you don't have to be worried about that your teeth are going to bleed. That's a davar she'eino miskaven. If it starts to bleed, you have to stop. But generally, if one's teeth don't bleed, then one doesn't have to. Good. That's the first half of the discussion. Davar she'eino miskaven is not called a Melachos Machsheves act, but Psik resha is. Psik resha is the foil of davar she'eino miskaven. Davar she'eino miskaven means it might or might not happen. The Gemara says often, Mo de Reb Shimon, Psik resha v'lo yamos. What's Psik resha v'lo yamos? Where does that lashon come from? So the Gemara talks about that children, I guess in the days of the Talmud, like to play with heads of chickens. That was a toy. So you want to go to your backyard, cut off the head of your chicken, and bring the toy to your child. What? You're going to do that? Your kavana is to just bring the toy? But the chicken's going to die. That's a malach of shochet. It's a malach of killing. Psik resha v'lo yamos, rhetorically, for sure it's going to happen, and therefore it's aser d'oraisa. If I do act A, which will vadai cause act B, that is a malacha. That is a malacha d'oraisa. That's what the Gemara says in a few places. You have it there in source 35. Abaya v'Rav Adam b'Travayu moder Reb Shimon Psik resha v'lo yamos. Why? There's a big lumdus here. It's known as Rebbe Chanan's Chakira in the Kovet Shiur Miksubis, but others have it. You have it quoted there in the bottom of page 267. Either it's because ki'ilu, if it's vadai going to happen, it's as if I had kavana, even though I didn't have kavana, to making the holes. Let's say it's a very heavy bench and a very soft earth. It's vadai going to make the holes, but I didn't have kavana for it. It's ki'ilu yad kavana. If it's 100%, it's ki'ilu yad kavana. Or what's called maisim mitzurafim. I don't need kavana. But if I have kavana for A, and A causes B vadai, then those maisim are mitzuraf to each other. And even kavana just for A is good enough, and I'm going to be chayiv for B. So those are the two lumdish understandings with many nafkaminas. Psik resha delonichale, savik psik resha, many other nafkaminas. Feel free, we'll talk about psik resha lumdis some other time. But that's the halacha. Halacha lamaisa, psik resha is chayiv daraisa. That's what the Rambam says. Also, source 37. Asa maisa, v'nasis biglalo malacha shevadai. I'm going to open the refrigerator. I know the light's on, but my kavanah is only to open the fridge. So no, that's psik resha. I'm turning on the light. Ki'ilu I had a kavana, or without, but that's a malacha. Avos lo niskaven. Shadavar yadua she'efshesh lo ta'asa also malacha. Right, we said before you're allowed to walk on grass. Davar she'eino miskaven. What about doing the tilas yadayim on grass? I'm just doing the tilas yadayim. I'm not kavana to water the grass. That's aser, says the Shulchan Aruch. That's an example of psik resha. Source 38. Ha'ochlim beginos. If your one is eating, having a picnic, asurim lito yedehem. You can't do netilas yadayim on grass. Shemashkim osan. That's watering them. Afal pishinim achavnim. Even though I don't have kavana to water them, psik resha, and therefore it's going to be aser. And again, this depends on circumstance. The Gemara says in Masechah Sukkah. Again, there's so much lumdus here. The Gemara in Sukkah talks about that for hadassim, for a hadas to be kosher, it has to have more leaves than berries. When we get our hadassim, they generally don't have any more berries. But when you pick it off a tree, I once picked hadassim, there are these red berries there. Your hands get all red. So the halach is you have to have more leaves than berries. What happens if when Yantav started, I forgot there were more berries than leaves on them. I forgot to take them off beforehand. So on Yantif, am I allowed to take it off? The answer is no. That's tikkun mana. That's an Isser, at least an Isser D'Rabbanan. That's Tikkun. Says the Gemara, you're not allowed, so it says the Gemara, so how could there be a Deya that says you're allowed to be a Ma'id on Yantif? Right, you're allowed to take off the berries. So the Gemara answers, Rav Ashi says, if you took off the berries, this is in source number 39, you took off the berries to eat. So if you took them off to eat, so then that's mutter. The Gemara says, one second, Psik resha. Psik resha, you took them off to eat, but it's vada going to make the hadas kosher. Answers the Gemara, to Isli Oshana Achrisi. I have another hadas, so I don't need this one. So it's the same act, but it's not, I don't need it. That's not Psik resha. It's not Psik resha because I'm not doing the act. And I have this hadas here. I'm not going to use it for the mitzvah, and therefore that's not Psik resha. Maybe that's called Psik resha de lo nichale. It's a Psik resha lo nichale, which is also not also daraisa. There's a machlokas rishonim whether that's mutter, that's the sheet of the aruch, or rov rishonim that say it's still asur d'Rabbanan because you're not getting hana from the malacha. That's why it's not daraisa. But we generally assume that it's still asur. Still asur d'Rabbanan. Just to note, if one wants to do further research, look at the Ar Sameach on the Rambam when he quotes this Gemara. The Rambam leaves out the Yukimta of Islay Oshana Achrisi. And the question is, the Ar Sameach discusses, how is that possible? It's only mutter if Islay Oshana Achrisi. The Rambam says it's mutter even without Islay Oshana Achrisi. So it's an unbelievable Ar Sameach on that Rambam that quotes this halacha. But we generally assume that Psik resha is asur d'Araisa, Psik resha de lo nichale is also asur d'Rabbanan. The only time that something might be mutter is if it's Psik resha, 2 points. Either it's a Psik resha of an Isser D'Rabbanan, there's some poskim, Rav Ovadia is Mekel. If it's a Psik resha of an Isser D'Rabbanan, Rav Ovadia in source 42, Afilu l'das achokim ala arach. Even those who argue on the arach and say Psik resha lo nichale is asur, they would only say that by an Isser D'Araisa. But if it's a Psik resha lo nichale of an Isser D'Rabbanan, so Rav Ovadia assumes that would be mutter near the kulayama moda the mutter lachachila. Must be l'kulayama. Many poskim argue with that point of Rav Ovadia. The Shmir Shabbos quotes from others that no, one is not allowed to do that. Even if something is only going to result in Isser D'Rabbanan, Psik resha lo nichale is still Asur D'Rabbanan. Dugma l'davar adam shesoger telas bebeis solatumo. A person is going out of their house. They're just closing their house door. V'yesham chaya. It happens to be a deer that ran into my house. I just want to go out to take a walk. Is that deer trapped in my house? No, because if I try to go get it, so it's trapped, but it's not trapped on a daraisa level because it's going to lunge away from me, and it's a big enough house that it's not called trapped yet. So it's only asur d'Rabbanan, but I'm still not allowed to do that. Even though lo nichale, I don't want this deer in my living room. Still, it's still asur d'Rabbanan. So we pasin against that Rav Ovadia. I say Ashkenazic poskim pasin against that Rav Ovadia. What would be mutter if it's Psik resha of a trey d'Rabbanans? Not just if it Psik resha lo nichale, but it's d'Rabbanan. If it ends up, there can be a confluence of two d'Rabbanans, Psik resha, that's mutter. Let's hear an example. Let's say cutting oranges on Shabbos, really juicy oranges. Cutting oranges. So often when I cut the orange, a lot of juice squeezes out. As I'm cutting the orange, I don't mean to squeeze it. So are you allowed to do that? Right? You're not allowed to squeeze fruit on Shabbos. So is that Tzricha? So let's think. The only grapes and olives are also daraisa to squeeze. So even if I would actually squeeze this orange, it's only asur d'Rabbanan. And I'm doing it in a Shinui way. I'm not squeezing. You don't usually squeeze by cutting. So that's two d'Rabbanans. It's Shinui and it's oranges. And I don't have kavanah for squeezing. I have kavanah for cutting. So that's like an example of a Psik resha with a double d'Rabbanan, two overlapping d'Rabbanans. That would be mutter. That would be mutter. If I'm squeezing it out because I want the orange juice to come out, fine. That would be a problem. But if I don't have kavanah, it's a Psik resha, so then that would be allowed. There is a big discussion in the poskim. Again, a big topic. Just to give you one makar, the Concept of Mishnah on the Rambam in the first perek quotes the son of the Rambam. Discussing what is the difference. Like what did we say before? Opening up the fridge. I want to open the fridge. I don't want to turn on the light. It's sometimes a little tricky to know the difference between a Melachos and a Tzricha legufa and a Psik resha, especially a Psik resha lo nichale. I'm doing it for a different purpose than was done in the Mishkan, but sometimes it's hard to know Act A, Act B. So the Concept of Mishnah here, Matzasi kasav a hefer sheish be Melachos and Tzricha legufa ube Psik resha v'lo yamus. The gabe Psik resha eino mechavin l'malacha kalikar. Psik resha means I don't have kavanah for the act at all. I don't have kavanah to turn on the light. The light is something separate. I have kavanah to open the fridge, not to turn on the light at all. The fridge is going to cause the turning on the light. That's Psik resha. I have kavanah for the act itself. Let's say trapping. I have kavanah to trap the animal. I don't want to trap it because I want the animal. I want to trap it so it doesn't bite me. But I have the kavanah for the exact act. That's the difference, says Rav and Rambam, quoted in the Concept of Misasek. Again, if I have kavanah for act A, which then will cause act B, that's Psik resha. And that's also daraisa. I have kavanah for the exact act, just for a different purpose. So then that's going to be Melachos lagufa. It's interesting, a little bit ironic, that if you formulate it like that, it seems Melachos lagufa, you have kavanah for the act, just with a different kavanah. Psik resha, you don't even have kavanah for the act. So Psik resha is chayav daraisa. Doesn't that seem more distant? Right? Melachos lagufa, you have kavanah for the mice itself. You're just doing it for a different kavanah, and that's going to be d'Rabbanan, according to what we paskin. Psik resha is chayav daraisa, even though I don't even have kavanah for it. So there's a lot of lumdus. There's a beautiful Aruch HaShulchan if you want to look in Reish Mem Beis Sif Lamed Daled. But that's Psik resha. Psik resha is a huge topic, but that's a little bit about it. Next, two more: Misasek and Grama. Misasek. What's Misasek? Misasek literally means involved. I'm involved in. I'm Misasek. I'm involved. I'm asuk with something. What does that mean? The Gemara says that's also a chisaron of Melechas Machsheves. We know what shogeg means. Shogeg means by accident, and there are different types of shogegs. I don't know today is Shabbos. I do a malacha, so I'm chayav a karban. I didn't know it was Shabbos today. Or I know it's Shabbos, but I didn't know this was Asur on Shabbos. That's also shogeg. I didn't know. But misasek means there's something lacking in the act itself. Let's say I brush against the wall and I turn on the light switch with my shoulder. I didn't even realize I was doing an act. That's an example of misasek. Or, again, we're not going to get into the details, but you can look here, in Krisus, the Gemara and the Rishonim have different discussions of Misasek, and we kind of pass them like all of them. What if there's Misasek, I think I'm going to do Act A, and I end up doing Act B. I reach down, I want to cut a flower, this red flower, I mean to pick it up, and I look away for a second, and when I reach down, I ended up picking a white flower instead of the red flower. Misasek, I didn't do exactly what I wanted. Or, what if I meant to pick up a detached flower? It was already detached. There's nothing wrong with that. And I ended up picking an attached flower. Again, if there's a chisaron in my das for the malacha itself, that's misasek. Or even if the light switch case, you don't brush against it, but when you go out of the bathroom, you turn the light off. If we would ask you, is it Shabbos today? Yes. Is it also to turn off lights? Yes. So why did you turn off the light? I just did it because it was just that's what I do. It's hergol. That's misasek. Again, these are all different levels of misasek. I have something in my pocket and I carry it out on Shabbos. Right? I didn't even realize. I was carrying it. Misasek. I don't realize that I'm doing a malacha. So all of those are also not chayav on Shabbos. That is called misasek. There is a huge discussion of lumdis. Rabbi Kiva Eger. You have the Tzurba Kiva Eger on page 275, page 48. Misasek seems to be different than shogeg, because shogeg you're chayav a karban, and misasek you're not. Rabbi Kiva Eger suggests, and also as he discusses this with the Nesivos, the Bekar Chaim, which is the Nesivos' commentary on Hilchos Pesach, maybe misasek is a deeper exemption than shogeg. Shogeg is a maisa avera with a patur onshin, and that's why I have a karban, because it was a maisa avera. Misasek maybe isn't even a maisa avera. It's not a maisa avera. You didn't do anything. It's not a physical act was done, but it's not attributed to you, and therefore it's not going to be. That's why you're not even chayav a karban. Rabbi Kiva Eger suggests maybe there's a difference between misasek and kol Torah kula and misasek and Hilchos Shabbos. Misasek and kol Torah kula is a maisa avera with a patur. Hilchos Shabbos, Melachos Machsheves teaches me it's not even a maisa avera. Not even a maisa avera. There are exceptions to misasek in other areas of halacha. The end of that Gemara in Krisos, you have it there on page 272, going to 273. Misasek b'chalav v'arayis chayav. And any avera of misasek, but I get physical pleasure, a maisa bia, food, I don't realize something is not kosher and I eat it. Then you're going to be chayav, because the hana'ah establishes it that it is my act. It is my act. That physical pleasure establishes it is my act. But in general, in Hilchos Shabbos, which is not about hana'ah, so then misasek is going to be not going to be an issur daraisa. Again, you can't say putter, like you're not going to be chayav a karban either. We try to prevent misasek. Right, we try to check our pockets before we go out. The Gemara says we try to. Some people have covers on the light switches. So we try to present Misasek, but that's another example of Melachos Machshavos. Finally, the last one for today, and that is Grama, indirect. In the Mishkan, they did direct Melachos. I have kavana, I do an act, it brings a result, Yashir, Maisa Yashir. Grama on Shabbos, indirect, is Durabanan. Right, that's what the Gemara gives the example by kibui. If there is a fire, and the fire is spreading, and if Bisman Hazeh, generally every fire is pikuach nefesh, put out the fire. But let's say it's a situation where there is no spreading. I remember we once had a case where the plata cover caught on fire. So we quickly took it outside and put it on the counter. Could put it on the deck with tiles. There was nothing around it. It was just going to burn out and go out. There was no danger. So you can't pour water on it. You could pour water around it, says the Gemara. Pour water around it so when the fire gets there, it's going to go out. That's indirect. That's gram kibui. So usually gram is also durabanan. But makum's danger, some danger like that, gram kibui is going to be mutter. That's why the example the Gemara gives in that regard. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. B'makom seida, in the case of potential loss, not b'makom sakana, b'makom seida, that's already enough to be matir gram kibui. And the Mishnah Berurah says in the Bir Halacha, this applies to all malachas. Lav dafka kibui, source 51. Tu malacha shezich legufa. Dafilu b'kol malachas adin kein. All gram is going to be mutter b'makom seida, and it's going to be asur d'rabanan shalom b'makom seida. There are many examples. Grama usually is a d'rabanan, but again, b'makom hefsid is mutter. I'll give you another one. B'makom psik resha is mutter. Sometimes I remember in the days of old, people used to have these shlocks on top of the sukkahs, this plastic they used to catch the water. And then let's say it got sunny out, so you want to take the cover off. So often when you take off the cover, the whole bunch of water falls down. So let's say it's on grass. If I take that off, it's going to go onto the grass. Psik resha. You can't take off the cover. Find another sukkah to sit in. But if it's on a deck, and first the water is going to hit the deck, and then it's going to roll onto the grass, that's psik resha. Psik resha, you don't have kavana to water, right? You just, it's going to end up doing it. Psik resha de grama, we paskin mutter. Psik resha is aser. Grama is usually aser d'rabanan, but psik resha de grama is mutter. But generally the yesod is Melachos Machshavos. So all of these that we've discussed, Misasek, we didn't discuss Makalkel, we'll have to get to that. Grama and Misasek and Psik resha, Melachos Gufa and Shinui, all of these are a function of the perfect work that was done in the Mishkan and the imperfect work that all of these represent. Note, 90% of the time, Melachos Machshavos ends up being a kula for Hilchos Shabbos. There are examples, including Baba Kama Daf Samach. There are examples where Melachos Machshavos turns out to be a chumrah for Hilchos Shabbos. It's not often, but there are examples. Hopefully we'll get to them at a later date. Have a great, amazing day, and this is an introduction to the Melachos of Shabbos. Again, the Tzurba Hilchot, wonderful, amazing series, the Lax Family Edition, and the Peretz Family Volume number 17. Have a great day.